Good evening, I'm Maciej Mikos and you're watching World News Tonight, live from Warsaw. Poland and Finland will co-lead the Eastern Flank Coalition, a brand new initiative aiming to boost the defense spending and security of EU member states bordering Russia and Belarus. It comes as the EU races against time to unblock frozen Russian assets to finance Ukraine. We'll have more from our correspondents on this in just a moment. But first, let's take a look at tonight's headlines. International Claims Commission tasked with assessing Ukrainian reparation claims created in The Hague. Polish student arrested on suspicion of plotting a terror attack on Christmas market. And as the European automotive industry falters, the EU Commission reverses its 2035 combustion engine ban. Countries facing Russia on the eastern flank of Europe have vowed to coordinate deterrence efforts and jointly seek billions in EU funds to boost their defences. Poland and Finland will be leading the 8-country so-called Eastern Flank Coalition. And so we're joined now by our correspondent, Kazimierz Łysiak in Helsinki. Good evening, Kazimierz. Can you break it down for us? What exactly does this new coalition aim to do and why are Poland and Finland leading it?
Good evening, Maciej. This was the first Eastern Flank Summit, which took place in the building behind me here in Helsinki. And the idea for this new coalition is quite simple. 8 countries of NATO's Eastern Flank, bordering either Russia or Belarus or both, are joining together to increase the defense capabilities, to coordinate together on defense. Coordinate, meaning coordinate on defense spending, coordinate on buying equipment together, but also increasing the interoperability, meaning, for example, military mobility, building road infrastructure, allowing forces from these countries to move quickly between one another. And when it comes to Poland and Finland, I mean, these are the 2 biggest EU and NATO countries bordering Russia and Belarus, with some of the longest borders with Russia and Belarus. So it only makes sense that they are the 2 leading countries. There is also an idea here behind this new Eastern Flank Coalition to put more diplomatic pressure on the European Union to gather more funds for these countries on NATO's Eastern Flank. All of this, of course, in the face of the ongoing Russian invasion of Ukraine and growing Russia's imperialistic ambitions. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk and his Finnish counterpart, the host of this event, said that they are committed to making NATO's Eastern Flank one of the strongest places when it comes to the entire alliance, and that this new idea will allow these countries, these 8 countries, to put more political pressure on the EU.
It means that it's pretty easy for all of us to cooperate on, not only on our level. I mean, we decided that we would work on also lower levels. I mean, our ministers, defense ministers, advisors, etc. It will be a permanent work. And of course, one of the goals is how to use effectively European funds and European money.
Europe is facing some of the most serious and existential questions of our time. This is why I have invited the colleagues from EU's Eastern Flank to Helsinki today. Personally, I believe this day marks a historical moment in strengthening the defense and security of both European Union and NATO. We are sending a clear and unified message.
And this summit here in Helsinki has taken place on the heels of other talks in Berlin between European leaders U.S. delegation led by Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, Donald Trump's son-in-law, and Ukraine talks about ending the war in Ukraine, peace talks on the latest proposal to end the conflict. And the leaders who came here to Helsinki were quite optimistic about the result of these talks. This new revised plan is now saying that the United States would provide security guarantees for Ukraine, similar to Article 5 of NATO. And while the leaders gathered here expressed some optimism, especially from a Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk, at the same time they said that these security guarantees from the United States are not concrete at all. There is no details on it yet.
The most important thing today is this political positive phenomenon. I mean that we are on the one side, finally. I mean the Americans, the Ukrainians and the Europeans, that now it looks like we are really one team vis-à-vis Russia. And I hope it will continue.
Let me be cautious, because what important was achieved, that Europe is at the table, Europe's voice is heard, but so far we do not see any reaction from Russia's Federation. And this is a little bit worrying, because we made some good amendments to this initial plan proposed by United States in form of Ukrainian army, in form of security guarantees, deployment of NATO troops in the territory of Ukraine. But we know the position of Russia, which is categorically against the deployment of NATO troops on the territory of Ukraine.
So some cautious optimism here from these leaders of these 8 countries, which include prime ministers of Poland, Finland, Sweden, Latvia, but also the president of Lithuania. Now, there was also another topic raised here among these leaders, the Russian frozen assets. But to have more on that, I'm sure you will hear in a moment from Alex Carrier, who's standing by. What the leaders who came here said is that they are hoping to resolve this issue soon to provide Ukraine with additional funding, which it very much needs. But in the meantime, back to you in the studio, Maciej.
That was Kazimierz Puszek reporting from Helsinki in Finland. Thank you very much, Kazimierz. So Belgium still opposes unfreezing Russian assets. According to media reports, the country believes that European Commission reassurances in this regard are not enough. And so we're going now live to our EU correspondent, Alex Carrier, in Brussels, as announced. Good evening, Alex. Now, given the continuing Belgian veto to use Russian frozen assets, should we expect any breakthrough in the negotiations set for this Thursday's EU summit?
Good evening, Maciej. The answer to that question is no, there will not be a breakthrough, we understand, before that meeting of European leaders right here in Brussels. The European Commission tried perhaps a last-ditch attempt to get Belgium to lift its opposition. It offered a couple things. It said to Belgium, if you do get sued, if there is litigation against your country for using the assets you hold at a clearinghouse right here in Brussels, you can dip into the frozen assets for as much as you want to pay for your lawyers to pay for that legal defence. The Commission also said, clearly hearing Belgium's concerns, that they do not want to sign off on a reparations loan, the Commission doesn't, until at least half of the assets used are covered by guarantees from other member states. The answer from Bart de Wever, the Belgian Prime Minister, remains no, nor, nay. In all 3 Belgian languages, it's a solid no from the Belgian Prime Minister. He does not want to move forward until the entirety of the reparations loan is guaranteed by other member states. Now, we heard from EU officials saying that they are still not sure, for example, if Poland will be willing to put some money on the table to say, well, we will cover any litigation or any costs should this plan go awry. We know that Germany has said it would. Now, again, this is part of the discussion and perhaps why a deal couldn't be clinched by the Commission in Belgium, because Belgium wants to hear from other member states. They want to hear from Emmanuel Macron, from Friedrich Merz, from Donald Tusk about what member states will do to assure that Belgium does not have to carry the can alone. Clearly, the expectations of a deal were pretty low before this meeting, so the fact that the Commission's attempts have failed, perhaps not entirely surprising. Belgium very firm in its opposition. We heard at the last Foreign Affairs Ministers meeting from Bulgaria, from Italy, from the new government in the Czech Republic, that they're also a little bit concerned about this reparation loan plan. But we also heard from the German Chancellor. He said this is the only way forward because public debt, borrowing more for the EU, is not an option. It would be blocked by other member states. We also heard the European Council senior officials I've been speaking to saying they will keep the leaders in the room here in Brussels for as long as it takes to hash out a deal. Now, in parallel, right, this is about funding Ukraine over the next couple of years, but there's also a question of what happens after a peace deal is reached. How will Russia pay reparations to Ukraine when a peace deal is reached? And for that, they have set up a commission in The Hague under the Council of Europe, a non-EU body, about exactly how that might work. And for more details on exactly how that might work, here's this report from my colleague Sonia Biszczan.
A signature to end impunity. European leaders gathered in The Hague on Tuesday, where 34 countries signed a treaty to establish the International Claims Commission for Ukraine,
which will deal with compensation for damage inflicted during the war. Every day in Ukraine, Russia is deliberately bombarding homes, destroying businesses and damaging infrastructure. And there must be no impunity.
The new body will begin work once 25 countries have ratified the convention establishing the commission, provided there are sufficient funds. At the event, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky called on the international community to continue supporting efforts to ensure accountability.
And when the guns stay silent, when the drones stop killing, the law must still speak.
The commission will be created within the framework of the Council of Europe and build upon the existing Register of Damage for Ukraine. Created in 2023, the register received over 80,000 compensation claims to date.
First, the register was created to register all the claims, now via this mechanism, all these claims will be processed. So, in other words, the mechanism will establish whether there has been a breach by the Russian Federation of its international obligations with respect to the claimants.
A Ukrainian MP told TVP World that the commission represents hope for the country's population.
We hope that Commission will be an efficient tool to actually compensate the losses to Ukrainians who either lost their homes, for communities which lost their schools, kindergartens and hospitals, which they need to actually serve to civilian population.
Nevertheless, there are still a few steps before claimants receive payment. The Claims Commission, once established, will only determine what is owed. The Compensation Fund, the third step of the international compensation mechanism, is yet to be put in place. Its source of funding is yet to be determined too, with early discussions suggesting it may include the use of frozen Russian assets.
It's also important to clarify to the audience that compensation claims are speedier than a judicial mechanism. So this is not a court of law which will be deciding, making decisions. This is faster. But in any case, the mechanism takes quite some time to operate in practice.
Justice takes time, but it must happen. And the International Claims Commission for Ukraine leads the way.
For Halina Yanchenko, the development sends a signal to Russia and others contemplating acts of aggression.
We believe that it will send a right message to all authoritarian regimes who consider breaking international legislation, who consider violating borders of their neighbors. If every crime is punished, there is less motivation to consider these types of crimes.
EU chief diplomat Kaja Kallas said the bloc would invest €1 million to finance the Commission's work. Approximately 3.5 million euros are needed overall. For TVP World, I'm Sonia Biszczan.
A Polish student has been detained after planning a terrorist attack on one of the country's Christmas markets. The 19-year-old tried to coordinate his actions with Islamic State terrorist cells. Our defense correspondent Zuzanna Jurek reports.
As was revealed Tuesday, 19-year-old Mateusz W. was detained by Poland's internal security agency in late November on suspicion of plotting an attack on one of the country's Christmas markets.
The man was preparing and gathering information on how to build explosive devices. His goal was to kill and intimidate, primarily Poles, to harm as many people as he could.
What is more, according to preliminary findings, the detainee maintained close contact with international terrorist cells.
He held conversations with representatives of the Islamic State and others, discussing the organization and preparations and the specific location of the planned attack.
And, according to the Polish security services, his radicalization grew gradually.
His family, as far as I know, is very Catholic. He studied at the Catholic University of Lublin and became fascinated with Islam and terrorism, which ultimately led to this.
According to experts, a worldview is just one of many factors capable of radicalizing someone.
The first one is quite obviously the sort of either internalized traumas and vulnerabilities or just the personality type. The second layer is the social layer. So the feeling of, for example, interconnectedness with a social group. Finally, there is the third layer, the political layer. So this general, more globalized outlook towards the world.
Just beyond Poland's western border, Germany has been grappling with an epidemic of Christmas-related terror attacks. Just on Sunday, 5 men were arrested for planning a strike on a market in the country's northeast region.
A suspect, a 56-year-old Egyptian national, is alleged to have called for an attack using a vehicle on a Christmas market, with the aim of killing or injuring a large number of people. 3 suspects, all Moroccan nationals, are said to have agreed to carry out such an attack.
Last year, Germany was struck by tragedy when 6 people were killed in Magdeburg. The suspect was put on trial in November on account of 6 murders and 338 attempted murders.
In case of a conviction, he faces the maximum sentence prescribed for murder under German law, which is life imprisonment.
The weekend's arrest highlight that German officials remain on high alert.
For the first time this year, there is video surveillance. We also have noticed that crowd management is very helpful in knowing where the hotspots are, where things are happening. If there are any incidents, this helps us. It helps the police a lot, and it's actually very minimally disruptive for people.
Poland, however, may still need to prioritize what experts have identified as its soft spot.
We focus on Christmas markets because Christmas markets in Western Europe have been subject to terrorist attacks. We forget that Poland has, unfortunately, an incredibly soft underbelly when it comes to crowded churches during the holidays.
And with Christmas just around the corner, officials urge citizens not to get too swept up in the holiday spirit and remain vigilant. For TVP World, Zuzanna Jurek.
The European Commission decided to lift a ban on production of combustion engine cars scheduled for 2035. The move against the bloc's green objectives is Europe's response to the car manufacturing industry's deepening crisis. Maciej has this report.
For the first time in the company's 88-year history, Volkswagen has cut back on car production in Germany, its home country. Earlier Tuesday, the last car, a red ID.5 GTX electric vehicle, rolled off the assembly line at Volkswagen's Transparent factory in Dresden, one of 10 production facilities the company operates in Germany.
In the longer term, we have to ask ourselves how much production capacity we will need in Germany, but also in Europe, looking forward. I think we need to think about possibly closing smaller plants.
It's a seismic decision for Germany's biggest car maker, which has been hit by a triple whammy of U.S. tariffs, falling demand at home, and rising competition from Chinese automakers.
The big party that this industry has been enjoying and from which German manufacturers benefited for a long time has come to an end. We have new competition, especially from China.
At the same time, tariffs imposed by the Trump administration earlier this year have already cost Volkswagen up to $5 billion, the company said. And according to consultancy firm Ernst & Young, profits of German car makers slumped to their lowest level since 2009 in the past quarter, back when the global financial crisis was hitting Europe. The auto industry's woes mirror that of the German economy, which has contracted for the past 2 years and is forecast to have barely grown this year. But in a victory for Germany's car makers, the European Commission on Tuesday decided to lift the ban on new gas-powered cars that had been scheduled for 2035, a rare rollback of Europe's climate goals.
Our automotive industry is absolutely vital to Europe's industrial strength. And 2 months ago in this chamber, we discussed the future of the automotive industry. And I'd committed to backing the sector so that automotive companies will not only survive, but will thrive on European soil.
Instead of a full ban on combustion engines, plans for which were first laid out 2 years ago, lawmakers are instead targeting a 90% reduction in tailpipe emissions and incentives for homegrown EV production. But with more pressing challenges still unaddressed, the EC's decision may do little to change the fortunes of car makers like Volkswagen. Maciej for TVP World.
No Christmas truce and no compromise over Ukraine's eastern regions. Russia rejects the Western peace plan's provisions. Will US negotiators convince Vladimir Putin to change his mind? To talk about it and more, we're joined by Daniel Fried, former US ambassador to Poland. Good evening, Mr. Ambassador.
Dobry wieczór. Good evening.
We'll start with something else, though. Poland and Finland will lead EU's eastern flank coalition to enhance the bloc's readiness in case of an armed conflict with Russia. Does this mean, in your opinion, that European countries are increasingly looking for different security opportunities simply outside of NATO?
I would say that European countries are working together to increase Europe's ability to defend itself in any event, no matter what happens with the Trump administration and the United States. This is a good thing. It is a good thing for European countries, particularly countries like Finland and Poland, who are, shall we say, clear-eyed and staunch about Russia's intentions and capabilities. It's good for them to be taking an active role. And doing so increases the odds that we land in a stable place between the United States and Europe. This is more possible if Europe is taking measures like this.
Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk stated after the recent talks in Berlin that, let me quote, "It finally looks like we're all on the same team, US, Ukraine and Europe." But the question is here, will it remain so? Or is President Donald Trump likely to change his mind again?
Well, I was delighted that Prime Minister Tusk was involved in this meeting. That is the right place for Poland to be. It needs to be in the small group of Europeans working with the Americans, making decisions about Europe's security. That's the right place. His was an optimistic tweet, and of course, Prime Minister Tusk wouldn't be optimistic for no reason. So that's a very good sign that the security arrangements are coming into focus and that they are real. Now, there are two questions. One, will the US back up the Europeans? The larger question is, will Putin accept any of this? And I think I'm fairly confident in saying that he won't. And then the question will be what we do. We will not get Russia to accept security for Ukraine out of the goodness of its heart. They will do so only under duress, under pressure. And the United States and Europe, but especially the United States, have to use the perfectly good leverage which we have to push Russia. Pressure doesn't derail diplomacy. Pressure enables diplomacy. The sooner we learn that lesson, the better.
Mr. Ambassador, are you calling for more sanctions to be imposed on Russia?
I'm calling for pressure across the board. I wouldn't start shouting, I would start acting. The U.S. Congress is preparing several new pieces of sanctions legislation. One was issued today. Perfectly reasonable steps for increasing pressure on Russia's oil exports. This is good. I hope that the European Union can find a way forward with the so-called reparations loan at the European Council later this week. And I hope that the encouraging signs about U.S.-European cooperation for the sake of Ukrainian security are actually realized. If we act in all three areas, economics, sanctions, security for Ukraine, the odds of successful negotiations with the Russians increase because Putin will respond to this pressure.
Talking about security for Ukraine, according to Polish Prime Minister, the US has agreed to use force in case of a Russian attack on Ukraine after, of course, the peace is reached. Now, what do you think? What do you think can the US do, having already stated that they will not send their troops to be stationed there in Ukraine?
Well, I don't know the details of what's being planned, but if you assume that we all have to work within the four corners of what Trump has laid out, which is no U.S. troops stationed in Ukraine, there's still plenty of good options. U.S. forward-based aircraft based in Poland, based in Romania, can do quite a bit, especially if combined with European units, air defense units, and other units stationed inside of Ukraine. I can imagine some good scenarios which would cause the Russians to reconsider plans for renewed aggression against Ukraine. Now, we're not there yet. I understand all of the problems and all of the obstacles, but the European leaders' statement issued yesterday was stronger than many people expected, and I think the Russian escalation of its demands indicates that they were thrown off by it, so they are resorting to the usual threats, bluster, and escalation. We ought to be prepared to push right past that, not take it seriously, except as a sign of Russian ill will and bad faith, and prepare to face down the Russians, working with the Ukrainians. That's the way to get to a durable peace.
About seriousness, Russia demands security guarantees for itself too. And I'm wondering here, why is Moscow insisting on this? And who could provide Russia with security guarantees in case of a Ukrainian attack?
This is all nonsense. It's very clear what the Russians are driving at. Lavrov said so today. He said that peace in Ukraine depends on dealing with the root causes, the first causes, as he put it. That includes, in his view, rolling back NATO enlargement to its 1997 starting point. This is not serious. This is trolling. He is simply being a provocateur to see how much he can get away with. And I don't see any reason to take this seriously. The Russians are demanding not only Ukraine's surrender, but NATO's surrender and a return to recognizing the Russian Empire in Europe. There is no reason on God's green earth we should take this seriously. We should prepare moves now to show the Russians that we will not be intimidated. I'm not against diplomacy. I'm just against diplomacy from a position of weakness when that's not necessary. We have perfectly good leverage. We shouldn't let it stay lying on the table.
Volodymyr Zelensky, president of Ukraine, believes that his country should be provided with more American missiles and air defense systems. Well, as you have pointed it already, to put more pressure on Russia. Let me quote Volodymyr Zelensky. I think this is a reasonable request. The logic is clear. If the Americans are ready to give Ukraine security guarantees and enforce strong measures if Putin violates them, then how is that different from asking for guarantees if Putin refuses to end the war? Do you see logic behind it?
The logic of President Zelensky's argument is that if the United States wants Ukraine to do the bulk of the work defending itself, which is the right position. Ukrainians need to take the lead in defending their own country. They can do so more effectively with the best American weapons. And let me add that because of the revolution in military technology we're seeing in the Russo-Ukraine war, we Americans need to be working with the Ukrainians, who have a very good set of experiences with drones and other unmanned vehicles. So we need to be working with the Ukrainians hard. And the more we do to help them, the better able they will be to defend themselves. But they're going to need American backup, and they're going to need European forces. Putin needs to realize that his attempt to shatter the Western alliance has failed. Now, President Trump has given mixed messages, sometimes worse. This is damaging to Trump's own objective of forging a peace in Ukraine and, as he likes to put it, winning. Winning is still possible, but that will require the United States to push back on Russia. Look, let's be serious. Polls already know, and they are right, that Russia will make maximum demands and not retreat from those demands unless it has to. So let's make them retreat from those demands. We're going to have to stare down Putin sooner or later. We might as well do it sooner and from a position of maximum relative strength.
Daniel Fried, former U.S. ambassador to Poland, was our guest this evening. Mr. Ambassador, thank you very much for this analysis.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, and thank you for watching. And stay with us for more interviews and news here on TVP World.